Hey guys, this is Pablo with Meditation Amsterdam, and in today's video I want to talk about the topic of problems. And what I want to do is I want to try and contrast how we typically define problems and by definition then how we go about trying to resolve them, and the Buddha's way of defining problems and how that definition then alters the way that Buddhists try to resolve their problems. And to do so, we can start with the traditional way in which we look at problems and we look at ourselves. If you look around, if you listen to friends, family, or even to yourself while discussing problematic situations, you will notice that the first thing you do is you define yourself as an individual that is in a contentious relationship with something in your environment. It might be a person, it might be a situation, it might be a place, it might be whatever you want to make of it. And so it's there's a dualistic relationship. You are a separate individual, and between you and something in the environment, there's an element that is problematic. Something is making emotions flare up in you, and you're trying to now grapple with that and perhaps trying to figure out what to do about it. So the approach tends to be very mental. It tends to be sort of analyzing things, making lists of pros and cons, trying to somehow negotiate or retreat or try to evade or try to impose your will over the situation. It involves pretty much every type of move, whether it is aggressive or passive, yin or yang. Although it's the other way around, aggressive would be yang. It involves everything other than doing nothing, essentially, because you don't feel good about the situation. And the other thing that you are likely to do is to notice and name the emotions that this situation is provoking in you and how intense those emotions might be. Right, so that's our typical way of going about this stuff. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to wrap our head around the situation. We're trying to grapple with it, analyze it, come up with solutions. And if we really can't find a solution, we're trying to kind of mentally reframe the situation, seeing the bigger picture, or, sunny side of the street type of exercise in our minds. If you're a little bit more advanced than that, you might be trying to do some sort of NLP work, right? Trying to change your mind on a bit of a deeper level, more sort of using hypnotic language patterns and things of that kind. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, the way you go about trying to tackle the problem is, pun intended, by definition, based on what you define a problem to be. Not that specific problem, but based how you frame a problem. So the way you frame what a problem is as a generic problematic situation dictates the way you try to grapple with a problem whenever a problem arises. Right? So definition, by definition, affects approach. And that's where Buddhism departs very radically from the way we normally do things. Because see, in Buddhism, those who traverse the path of meditation and self-cultivation inevitably arrive to the conclusion, and this is not a theoretical conclusion, it's not even an experiential conclusion, but it is a living reality. The fact that the duality of self and other and the individual egoic self that we consider ourselves to be is a false view of things, right? It's completely spurious. And therefore, the way we typically define a problem suffers from a critical issue. It is based on incorrect assumptions of duality, the duality of self and other. It is based on incorrect notions of the idea that we are a separate individual self. Now, it does no good for a Buddhist who has traversed the path to try to convince someone who has not traversed the path that this is the case, because that the sharing of that information of saying, well, there is no self and there is no problem, it's a pretty cruel and silly thing to do, actually, right? It doesn't work, first of all. It also makes the person who has a problem feel like they are not being listened to. There's no empathy in the air, and most of all, it's information that is going to bounce, because it is information that is based on insight, which is the outcome of a cultivation process. It is not information that can be conveyed, such as me saying this is a black t-shirt. Right? That is not on the same category, because it is based on conditions of the mind having been cultivated that lead to seeing through the separation of self and other. So when I make these kind of videos and I try to explain these things, I'm by no means trying to simply sweep problems under the rug by saying there is no self, there is no problem. That is an idiotic thing to do. Very, very popular in these Neo-Advaita circles, extremely toxic, if you ask me. So what we're simply trying to indicate is that Buddhism defines problems in a different way, because they have seen through the separation of self and other. So what Buddhists come to realize in that process of the dissolution of the self is that problems are situations in which the separation of self and other becomes apparent and irreconcilable, and that it is impossible on that level, on the level of separation, to somehow come to a happy conclusion about this. Because at the end of the day, so long as we are believing that we are a separate self, so long as that is our lived reality, then problems will arise on a constant basis, because we're bumping into things as separate selves. Yeah. I was reading I Am That by Nisargadatta Maharaj yesterday for the 11th time. And he says something very interesting. He says existences collide all the time, but being never does. Meaning being is fully integrated. It's a single monolithic thing. There's no separation there, so it cannot conflict with itself, whereas existences are separate and they bump into each other. Right? So on the level of existence, you cannot really get at the bottom of the problem. You can only come to sort of compromises that never really cut the mustard, right? Now, how do you really get to the bottom of problems is by dissolving the self that believes itself to have those problems. And that's a very difficult exercise, because we require what Buddhism calls viveka, or discernment. And discernment can be cultivated. So we can refine our mind to learn to decompose or separate the different elements of an experience, of a problematic experience, so that we can clearly see that it's made up of physical components, an emotional layer, a layer of narrative and memory, and also it is made up of a layer of selfhood or identification, meaning you might, there may be sensations in the body, there may be emotions flaring up, there may be thoughts, but there is one root sense that says all of these are about me, or an apparent me. And that's the really problematic one. It's the one that attributes, that attributes physical, emotional, and mental happenings to a spurious self that never really shows itself. It's somewhere in the background, right? It's the homunculus behind your eyes, or the ghost in the machine that doesn't really exist, and that creates a separation. So in Buddhism, the way to tackle problems is to clarify experiences. So rather than going into the analytical and emotional route and saying, well, this is how I feel, and that is how I think, and these are the pluses and the minuses, and here's the action that I'm about to take about it, Buddhism goes, no. don't identify with the thoughts that are arising about the situation. Do not identify with the emotions or with the physical sensations. Simply observe them all as clearly as you can. And when you have observed all of those, then retreat back and try with your attention to find that apparent self which is claiming all of these. What you will realize when you trace that self back is that the self is a kind of momentum of departure away from the experience of discomfort being direct. And in clarifying, you come to see that there is a situation, okay? It might be an uncomfortable and it might be an inconvenient situation. And that discomfort and that inconvenience might reflect itself in physical sensations, emotional tone, and mental agitation. But you need not identify with any of those. They don't belong to anybody. The self that is claiming them is not real. It has no actual being. There is no entity to whom this is happening. That sense of self is just a sense, just like the sense of smell or the sense of touch. It's a much more complicated sense, granted, and it's also much more subtle, and it's also way deeper, and it is not an explicit sense. It's kind of implied in the background. That's why it's tricky to catch. But it's a sense nonetheless, and it is also spurious. When you try to find it, you won't find a self. So when you start doing this enough, you come to realize that every single hang-up you've ever had has been happening to a you that is not quite there. And that it's never been about resolving your hang-ups. It's always been about disidentifying from them. So the disidentification from your hang-ups, as I said, is not just something you do and say like, there's no self here and it no longer counts, because life will test if you really believe it in your bones. And if you're faking it, you're going to pay a price. So it's about the refinement of your mind, the refinement of your consciousness in a systematic way to perceive more clearly, faster, more refined. And with that more refined tool, you point that refined tool to the clarification of somatic, emotional, mental elements of a quote-unquote problem, and then you turn that hyper-refined tool to look at the sense of self that is claiming all of them, and you sever that sense of self from the root, and then the entire tree of the problem essentially disappears. In Japanese perennial lore or Zen lore, they talk about the sword, the tales of the sword Taya. And the sword Taya refers to the most refined level of awareness. And they speak of it as a sword so sharp that it can actually cut through the very fabric of space and time. It can cut through reality. It's infinitely sharp, so there is nothing that it can't squeeze in between. And therefore it can sever cells from the root. And so the reason we do embodiment, meditation, and training of breath work and all these things is to regulate the nervous system, refine our perception, and with that refined perception, turn it into the sword Taya, which can then start to slash away. They also speak of it as a sword that can cut demons in all 6 directions, 10,000 miles in every direction, something along those lines, right? So the power of the refined mind, the power of a refined awareness that can see and cut directly through what appears to be a self having problems, is the way that the Buddhist tradition and Zen Buddhism as well suggests we deal with situations. So I found the whole notion of the sword Taya to be actually very inspiring. And I'm very curious, as usual, what you guys make of the topic. So do share your comments in the comment section. And as usual, if you think that these talks are potentially beneficial to others, then your liking, your sharing, and subscribing is super motivating to me, and it also makes the content more available out there. So thanks for listening. I'll be back with more videos for you soon. Cheerio and bye-bye.